What tech are you actually using in your practice?
Look at a business model from 20 years ago that was basically the norm, and it ain't as profitable as today, that's for sure. And we had one staff member who that was in their job, was to book and remind and rebook stuff. That was 40% of her time across 3 advisors. Like, think about the cost savings.
How can we make smart decisions now, or what should we be thinking about so we don't get left behind?
In 2 years' time, your life's not going to change much because of artificial intelligence, but in 10 years' time, your business is going to be completely different.
Okay, Jason, you're one of the few people that I see out there that I know who actually bridges these two worlds pretty well. You're a practicing advisor, and you're also an expert on advisor tech. So today I want to just talk about 3 things. We could talk about more, but these are the top 3 things on my mind that advisors are wondering about. And it's what tech are you actually using in your practice day to day that's either saving time or improving your practice? Could be new, could be old, whatever comes to mind. Second thing is, how's AI, in your opinion, reshaping the way that we're serving clients now and in the future? And then third, how can we make smart decisions now, or what should we be thinking about so we don't get left behind in this, what seems like a big new wave of change? So I'd say to start out, what are some of the tools, either AI or other, and use cases you're already doing that advisors should know about?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a bit of a productivity hacker, so wherever possible that I can get a small edge on something, I actually will typically take it up. And I mean, that leads me to use when people ask me, what am I using in terms of technology? It's like, it's a really long list, and I don't encourage you to do that because I do a lot of experimentation, and it gets a little disjointed. It works for me, but it doesn't work for a lot. So look, there's, people will often joke about the size of the Kitsis map being to the point of absurdity where you can't actually understand anything. And I say, it's good and bad. You have too many choices, but the great thing is you have so many choices for something that's going to fit your specific business operation and what you're trying to accomplish. And if designed right, basically move the needle, not just on value delivery, but also on productivity, right? What am I using in my practice? The simplest thing that saved the most time that hopefully it's become commonplace is, of course, calendar booking systems, right? Even if clients hate filling them out, I will fill it out on their behalf, but at least the the reminders and the nudges, like, those are invaluable. The amount of time that, the drop off in meetings being forgotten about, or the amount of time spent by people to remind people about meetings, it's just a huge productivity saver. I mean, I remember implementing that. And we had one staff member who that was in their job, was to book and remind and rebook stuff. That was 40% of her time across 3 advisors. Like, think about the cost savings there, right? So that's just a small example of one that everybody should be using by now. When it comes to the AI side and other things that are happening right now, look, the obvious one's been meeting notation. It's been, basically pushed out, across any number of vendors, and has been the most obvious use case for financial planners to basically improve their productivity, because it took something that was a pain, a post-meeting 10 to 40 minute to an hour long process to make notes, to send reminders, recap emails, to push out stuff to CRMs, all that other stuff. And took a process that was, let's just say on average, probably half an hour, down to something like less than 10 minutes, right? And that is an enormous time saver. That's why these things have been proliferating so much. However, I will caution that, whereas for people like me who actually did that work before, it's saving us time. The advisors who never took notes were bad. Do we really think that they're actually editing these things? No, they're not, right? And this is creating a new compliance headache for departments, whereby advisors are not taking the time to validate that everything is right and then saving it. And then guess what? Guess what becomes gospel when the court case happens? It's like, oh, this was in your notes. Well, I didn't mean that. It was the AI. Well, okay, prove that you didn't mean that, given the notes exist as the proof point. So that's one. Now, the reality is that there hasn't been, and then the only other software I'd say that's really moved the needle in terms of productivity gains in the last couple of years has been, and it's just coming to the US now, specifically in enterprise, and will eventually move down market, is a financial planning software called Conquest, which brought AI to financial planning before Gen AI was a thing. And it is able to run more calculations, run through more scenarios, and make recommendations faster than any human being can. So the amount of time it takes when I get to the I've already got the information, now it's time to do the planning. The amount of time it takes to create a plan is shrunken immensely, and it's done so while increasing the quality of the output. Also, the ability to create repeatable reports or customize reports is so much more faster than being able to download a PDF or download a Word document and edit that. So it's really done a lot to save time in terms of that part of the process. But in terms of, what else has really moved the needle in the last couple of years, there hasn't been a lot, but there's a lot coming, right? And what I mean by that is that, there's a lot of potential behind AI, but we haven't seen the culmination of it. We haven't seen it actually really used in a lot of ways. So areas we're seeing it done is in extraction of data, like basically taking a statement, pulling out positions, whatever else it might be, a research. But there are companies now that are starting to not do the more obvious thing. Like, again, the obvious thing was meaning notation. The less obvious thing is, how do we not just solve for one problem, but how do we look at an entire job to be done and all the points of interaction that happen through that? And how do we use the best tool, whether it's AI or not, to solve a problem along that journey? And I'll give you an example. One of the companies I work with and advise, a company called InvestiPal, which is available in the US. They do a number of things, including acquisition to reporting, but essentially you can collect information from a client and then eventually at the end of it, produce an IPS and then handle rebalancing and monitoring. Well, where do they use AI? They use it in smart spots in the journey. So they use it in basically in extracting of client statement information so you can compare it to your model portfolios. They use it in the model portfolio development section to help you basically data mine for information. They use it in the IPS generation where you're not just using a static template. You start with a static template, but then you customize. You can click on any section and say, rewrite this for this client, specifically focusing on the ESG merits of this portfolio, or talking about the risk downside protection, whatever's important to the client. You can have it basically give you a first draft of the composition of that. So that's where I think things are going to get interesting, is when all these platforms start saying, I'm not going to build an AI platform necessarily from scratch, but using our journey, using our software was taking clients 40 minutes, advisors 40 minutes to get something done. How do we insert AI at different points to really shrink that down to 10?
Yeah, interesting. So you mentioned a few services or products out there. Are you actually using Conquest in your firm right now?
Yes. Well, I mean, I have the benefit and the unfortunate problem of being in Canada. And Conquest did launch in Canada first. I'm lucky enough to know those guys going back to when they were beta testing. So I've been providing feedback for a long time. So yeah, we've been using that. We're one of the earliest users of that software in the marketplace.
Interesting. I've been looking at that. What did you use before Conquest?
Canada did not have the options that you did. So we had Naviplan was the largest player in the enterprise space at the time. Ironically,
Okay.
the guys from Conquest were the guys who created Naviplan in the first place, but that's just a different story.
Yeah, that's interesting. We don't need to focus too much on Conquest, but I watched a little bit from I think the CEO talking about it and just what they're hoping to do or what they're already doing. And it looked really interesting. One question I had that you would know, is it gathering data for you from the client in an easy way, or is it still kind of the traditional way of getting the data?
Well, it does have the multiple ways. So first off, there is a client onboarding flow that does a very simplified questionnaire that will get you from opening that email to starting the plan as fast as possible. For more complex cases, it's going to be not enough, right? The advisor got to layer on additional information. The other way it does it is that the entire thing is built API out. Every last function, every last field, everything can be populated via API. So it's able to basically like pull from other systems that are integrated into it and update whatever's necessary. So there's plenty of firms in Canada that have done full CRM integrations, full portfolio management integrations, and now, as much as possible gets populated on a daily basis. And then the last piece is, yes, the traditional methodology of going screen to screen and inputting everything manually still absolutely exists to basically either start from zero or to audit what was there or to enhance what was there.
Mm. You mentioned CRM and the meeting note takers and how they're synced up. And this is probably just an opinion, or a guess, do you think that these meeting note takers are going to expand their offering to become CRMs? Do you think that the CRMs like Wealthbox and whatever, Redtail, they're going to have their own meeting note takers and there's going to be some competition there?
So there's a bunch of aspects to that question. So first off, do I think they're going to become, when I meet any new, and by the way, full disclosure, I advise a company called Focal who's in this space. Um, the, when I meet a new note-taking company for the first time, I say, that's cute. What are you going to be when you grow up? And that's not to be a jerk. That's basically is to say is that, look, meeting notation got commoditized like that. It was so fast. And it was so fast because it was an obvious use case that was easily implementable, that literally you could download a model, get it trained up. It was not that difficult to get a minimum viable product out of it. To refine it for an industry and make it better, now the functionality is more work, yes. But the reality is that is not a long-term viable standalone business, in my opinion. Right now it is, but you look at them and they're already all signaling that they want to go in different directions, right? So where are they going to go? I do know some that have designs on basically becoming the CRM of the future, right? I think that's a longer, harder road than a lot of them anticipate is going to be the case. I think there's more complexity to that. I think the problem with CRMs is they have been dumping grounds to date that we then hope to action afterwards. And I think there's other ways to do it. I'm advising another company called Supervisor that's looking at doing something a little bit different in that space. But in general, I think that yes, some are going to go down that path. I think some are going to go down different paths. I don't think any of us know yet what the future of what is the thing that right now advisors will look at their portfolio management software, the temples, the productivity suite, the financial planning software, the CRM is where we live most of our day, and then the portfolio management software. Like those four things are the four temples holding up the business. And we spend time between all of them, and CRM is probably the one we spend the most time in. I don't know that something deposes that, but I think it's not impossible that someone creates the one AI-driven dashboard that pulls in the 80% of all this so that we don't necessarily have to go into these specific systems. So I think that some of these companies may evolve into some sort of other headless platform where they tie into these other systems while simultaneously giving you a better native experience. So that's one thing. And then the last piece is, if anyone thinks that if these guys think that the CRM companies aren't going to fight back, they're kidding themselves, right? They see this as a mortal threat. And they basically, like Wealthbox, has come out with their own note taker. And then, Salesforce is going to always fight tooth and nail to maintain its dominance. So I think in general, they've all added, and I've seen other softwares that aren't even CRM softwares, add meeting notation as a function. I worry about that from two standpoints. One, there's a problem in software I like to refer to as the crappy CRM problem, using the nicer term for it as opposed to the one that's going to get us rated. And that's that too often in this industry, advisors will say, oh, that PM software or that software you built here, or that, if I could just put my notes in there, it would replace my CRM. And the next thing you know, first off, if they were actually going to put in notes into a CRM, they'd be doing it already. What they're saying is that I don't do this work, but I would do it here, but that's not necessarily. So next thing you find is that you have this crappy CRM that you now developed that isn't as good as something else sitting in a software that's never designed to be a CRM, and you have to maintain it. And now it's a nuisance more than it is an actual core product offering. And it's not always a CRM. It could be when, a lot of people keep on trying to turn financial planning softwares into portfolio management softwares and portfolio proposal softwares. You get all of these things where the company is really good at doing one thing, starts adding things outside the box, and it's just a substandard version of what's available in the marketplace. And then they end up not getting much adoption, but it becomes a distraction. So, I think that the CRM companies that basically are looking at adding meeting notation, my advice to them is they can't look at it as that. They need to look at it as, look, let's take a step back. The most powerful thing about the meeting notation softwares is they are inserting themselves in the most valuable time and place of an advisor's life, which is the client interaction. They have literally inserted themselves in the room when that happens. And there's so much information to be garnered, there's so much to be action there that it creates all this potential downstream. So they are, if they're smart, looking at themselves as not just, hey, this is how we prevent these guys from basically deposing us, is by adding the same functionality. They should be looking at it with fresh eyes and saying, we are now in the room. We weren't in the room before. What is it we can do now because we were in the room that we wasn't before, beyond just the updating of the CRM notes and whatever? What else can we action? And really, this all comes down to they need to look at the world of what jobs we need to do and how they enable them, and realizing that CRM notation, the notation and CRM are just 2 points of the journey of getting something done.
Interesting. So I'm curious if, I actually have a specific question. Have you looked at Hazel AI? at Altruist and what they're doing?
So I have an interesting history there. The company they bought actually came to me for advice, and
Okay.
it was good. They're very bright. They just left YC, but they had this vision that was largely based on advisors servicing thousands of people, right? And and I said to them, they have an engineer's view of the universe, right? They think of this as a numbers game. When actually, you and me, Dave, like practicing advisors, we don't want a world where we service 2,000 clients, right? Like
Mhm.
that puts us in competition with discount brokers and robo advisors, and the human being, the individual advisor, the one providing planning and deep, powerful meaning, and all this evolution towards the behavioral side of finance. Like that's not the role we play, right? That's the thing that's commoditized and deposed. I told them that, they were shooting in the wrong location. And interestingly enough, I said, they asked me, who do you think what we've done is of value to? And I said, look, honestly, like anyone who's looking to do a mass audience type amount of work, right? Or do things for a large number of people beyond the advisors who are looking to serve 100 to 200 households. I always said, I always talk to the custodians. And I said, like, talk to the likes of Schwab. And I said, and you know what? If anyone's going to get you, it's Altruist.
Nice.
And then they
Good
got
call.
bought. And then they got bought. So I haven't seen how they've integrated into it. I will be seeing that at a demo drop at Future Proof shortly. I'm not sure when this is airing, but they are going to be there. So I'll be getting, and I have to catch up with Jason to see what's happened. But nevertheless, I have not seen it yet. But I have a general sense from what I've seen, when I knew what they were doing before, and basically what I've seen them release in terms of the text of what they said that they've done with Altruist. But I think it was a very smart move for Altruist to pick up some very bright engineers who were thinking about scale, who were thinking about AI at scale, and thinking about AI servicing at scale. Like, I think that was a really smart pickup for them.
Yeah. Well, I've actually been testing it the last 3 months, and
So what do you think?
I'm a big fan.
There we go.
So it started at, just a few months ago. It was mainly meeting note taking, which is still great and wonderful. The things that it's actually turning into, this will sound weird, but it's turning into a trainer for our advisors because of the customized prompts that we're using within, related to specifically first and second meetings.
Yep.
When it comes to ranking them on how they're doing with rapport and trust building and finding the pain and all these things that we want to do, it's giving this advice. It's even giving advice after a client meeting where someone opened up about her childhood, and she was talking about kind of money learnings when she was little. And the advisor afterwards was like, I don't think I did a great job engaging with that conversation. So just asked a question to Hazel AI, and he's like, was there anywhere in the meeting where I could have done better connecting and building rapport? And it got to that exact moment, and it said, when this lady said this, you could have engaged this way and give some amazing training. So like that's
interesting. And I'll tell you why in two fronts. And first off, I mean, I have a tremendous amount of respect for Jason Wenk and what he's done over at Altruist, both rethinking like a lot of the custodial model, but also like just the way he thinks about, he understands the advisor's job to be done. And that's why I think that was a really good pickup for a good partnership there. I love what you're talking about there. In fact, I am advising a company doing something like that. And it's not fully public, but it will be at some point soon, but Shaping Wealth, who's been at the forefront of behavioral finance training for advisors and effective implementation, is we are working on basically turning all of that into APIs and into basically an AI-driven API that basically will be the thing that will be the behavioral engine of the industry. And while I love what I'm hearing there from what Hazel's done, and it did identify some pretty, some great stuff there, my concern there is, where is it being trained? What data is it being trained off? What knowledge is it taking? Because you can take generic papers for, published by academics and, process some books and whatever else to train it. But I think that what I really love about Shaping Wealth's done and our position with that is they are strategically placed because they have over 10,000 pieces of content that is hyper-focused on the exact advisor client's experience. So great. I think they'll all have some base level. They've all talked about getting into behavior. There is some base level efficacy that they will all have. And then basically turn around and basically, effectively give you something. But I really think that the quality of those responses is going to be highly dependent upon what's trained.
Yeah. Yep. 100%. I want to get to some of the behavioral questions I've got for advisors. But before we do, if you were starting over and starting from scratch, and I know it might be hard because you advise a bunch of different companies, but
Yeah.
what would your simplified tech stack, or it doesn't have to be simplified, but what are those main things? The 80/20 tech stack, what would you be using?
So let's talk about the minimalist tech stack. So the reality is what are the tentpoles? I just mentioned them: productivity suite, financial planning software, portfolio management software, and CRM. Right. So
Can you define productivity suite?
Microsoft Office or Google Apps.
Okay.
That's basically it. So, and I think, again, going back to Altruist, what they've done is a wonderful job of disaggregating the need for a lot of the PM software work, right? Like you can basically just use Altruist. You can use something else, but bottom line is you can use that. So the reality is that effectively, what are you running your investments on? What are you doing financial planning on? What are you basically, so you get those 4 core ones. And then the question becomes, which ones you would use. I'm not a Microsoft guy at all. I'm a Google guy. You then basically CRM, if you're starting from zero, you're not going to go do Salesforce. It's way too much overkill for anyone. Again, I'm going to plug what I think we're, right now in the US market, you're going to start with probably Wealthbox. You might still look at, if you're using Orion, you're going to use Orion for PM software, you're going to use Orion and Redtail. I think in general, I'm going to say that what we're working on with Supervisor, I think is incredibly powerful in terms of productivity. And I think that's going to be really interesting to see hit the US market in the next little while. And then the financial planning software, as a standalone advisor right now, you don't have an option to get the Conquest, but as soon as that option is there, I would absolutely take them. And what I'm going to with all this is that like these all integrate to some degree or will integrate to some degree. But we're still early. But I also would heavily be leaning in to where can Gen AI basically support me in workplace productivity and flows. And here's the other thing I would do that a lot of people that I think is going to be very interesting in coming years is I would look at the things that those softwares don't do and the business process and the offering I want to create. And where a solution doesn't exist or what I'm doing is very specific to what I want to accomplish, I would create my own software. And what I mean by that is there's a concept out there called vibe coding, which is using artificial intelligence to create your own software. And there are platforms like Lovable and Replit that you don't need to know a line of code. You can go in and tell the software you want it to do, and it will create it in front of you. I would say be very careful with this. You need to be able to audit the output to make sure that it's accurate. But what I've managed to accomplish for my own practice in the last couple of months early on, and even to the point where I will be standing up a software company in Canada myself specifically for software that doesn't exist, like it took a matter of weeks to prototype the entire thing. And now I say weeks, that was me working when I had free time here and there. So the ability to, if you say to yourself, look, I'd like to be able to create this report that harmonizes all this other stuff and no one's doing this, like the ability to create your own secure version of this and just be able to solve your own problems now does not take a level of proficiency anymore when it comes to technology.
So what's the advantage of, this is a financial planning software, right? That you vibe coded. What's the advantage? I mean, I think I know, but that eMoney and Conquest and others have, as it gets easier and easier to just say words and create whatever you want via coding.
Yeah.
What do they have that you don't have?
No, it's simple. This is a complexity issue, right? So when people say like, oh yeah, the Gen AI is going to get rid of the financial planning softwares we have or get rid of whatever else, I sit back and say like, have you not found this thing like getting it wrong all the time? Like I look, there's a saying on trust but verify. Like I have caught Gen AI missing the mark on countless things. Like its hit rate is nowhere near as good as many lay people give it credit for. And I always make sure it references whatever it's looking up. And even though it's wrong a lot, it's still saving me a tremendous amount of time, right? So that's why I go through this pain. And the reality is that when it comes to something as mission critical as getting financial planning numbers right, or managing your portfolios or rebalancing them, you can't afford a failure rate. Like you cannot afford a substantial failure rate there. So where those softwares exist, they're dealing with things that have a high degree of complexity, and they are making sure that stuff is as accurate as humanly possible. And it's really robust. So I would never try to code that, to vibe code that or create that myself. There's just too much that goes into it. There's no, I mean, like these companies got to the point, the number of people that they have working on these problems to create a software that is effective, to think that we're just going to displace that with me vibe coding, that is an unknown problem. I really don't, I think I can do that. I don't really understand the depth of the problem that these people are solving. So in reality I still think we're going to rely very heavily on a couple of things that are mission critical, but it's the things where it's simpler, right? It's pulling together solutions from different places. And I'll tell you, I got to see, hopefully I'm not saying too much, but the early stage experiments of Conquest's MCP into a Gen AI agent. And, we did some experiments where it's like, okay, great, pull the information, a summary on this financial plan. I pulled the summary. Great. That's base level stuff. But then I said, let's run an experiment. Let's say that this, my kid is going to start school and wants to go to this program at this university. How does the cost of that look relative to what I've saved and what I'm planning on saving? And will there be a deficit? And first thing it did was go to the internet, look up that university, that program, pull the information on what was going to take, came back with the estimate on what all the costs are going to be associated with going to that school for 4 years, and then basically pulled the information from the plan subsequently and said, here's basically what you were planning for. There's a delta. It is this much. There's a gap. Here's some solutions. It basically said, like, go back in the planning software and see if you can save more, blah, 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 free up from these other goals, which were already in the software. And this is beautiful, it started rounding out the stuff that no financial planning software can factor in or will because it's too ambiguous. So specifically, like, here are student loan programs, here are grants and bursaries, here are things that, so it started really just rounding out the advice that the advisor would normally give. But now also I was able to then, if I wanted to, I could have been like, give me a list of bursaries that here's my kid's situation, right? Here's their grades, here's whatever, give me a list of things they might qualify for. So like that sort of stuff, I think what's going to happen is that it's kind of a threefold thing. We're still going to, for quite a long time, rely upon the heavier lifting and more complex software to do the more complex things that are mission critical. A lot of these things are going to become borderline headless. Like, you're going to use some sort of chat agent or some sort of other console in the future to tie into these things to basically allow you to access information from all of them and the outside world in one place. And then you're going to augment that with the job to be done that you want to do. Do I want to create an entire standard presentation around university funding levels and options that I want to repeat with all my clients, right? Well, okay, I could literally program a small piece of software with an agent to give me a visual interface on how I can edit this thing, create it, and then, or just create a lot of reports that are not standard, these other things. And basically have it pull from these APIs this information and the button push produce that report, right? Like, there's, the question, I now have gotten to the point where I think to myself, okay, I need to have this project done by my staff in order to clean up this data or do whatever. I stop, I have to find myself, catching myself and say, okay, can I vibe code this? Right? What's the level of complexity to this? Is it something I can validate by looking at the outputs myself to make sure it did it right? And if the answer is yes to those, I just run an experiment and see how far I can get.
Do you like Lovable or Replit more?
I'm using Replit because I've largely been in that ecosystem for a while, but I've heard really good things about both of them. So now I will also caution you, the more complex and deeper you go, the more frustrating it can get, because sometimes you'll just get into points where you can't get past it. You will need someone who can actually develop to get past some of the problems that it can't get past at this point.
Interesting. Very fascinating. I love that you're doing that. I'll have to look over your shoulder sometime when you're doing.
I'll give you a peek of something I'm working on that when we're done here.
So you touched on it earlier with behavioral planning and helping clients, and you and Brian, you've kind of come from the standpoint of that's the advisor's edge moving into the future. So how can we think about developing that skill, not just conceptually but tactically? How do we keep getting better at that?
So yes, look, I think I'll also say that I'll give you two pieces of background here. First off, I believe that the entire history of this industry and the technological evolution of it has been basically to move away from commoditized services and move closer and closer to the human, right? From, the industry was about access to markets that got commoditized. Then it became about portfolio management. That got commoditized. Then it became about financial planning. And we're seeing, I think that's still that level of complexity where it will not be fully commoditized, but it will become easier and more accessible through some agents for the mass market. The more complex cases will still require that. But then we started moving further and further to, as more and more advisors started providing it and started getting closer to commoditized, you got more into holistic financial planning, right? And comprehensive, going into all these different areas, right? That the CFP curriculum covers. And now, like, that is also getting enabled and digitized through the likes of softwares like FP Alpha and Holistaplan to say, like, hey, you can do a review of wills and insurance and tax returns and do all this work for them, or you could upload it to us and make it a button push, right? So it makes it easier, but it also commoditizes access to it more readily. But all of this has been moving us closer and closer and closer to the human and the human experience when you think about it, right? We've been providing more and more value to the underlying human being. And the best version in this industry is one that basically sits across from a client and says, how do I help you live the best version of your life and help you self-actualize the best dream of what it is you want to accomplish proactively? And that's the direction we've been moving. But the direction we've been moving to date is not effectively. Everybody's been talking about B5 for years, and Brian will often say it's been a dud because it's like memorize these lists of things to shame people over. When in actuality, understanding the behavioral finance should be about understanding the human being across from you and what's preventing them from success. What's preventing them from taking your advice? Every advisor will say, well, the client's just not listening and whatever else. But like, okay, fine. But like, why? Like, why is this person struggling with this thing, right? Like, whether it be the advice I'm giving them or something else in their outside world, where is this struggle coming from? And often it's just rooted in our histories and our financial traumas and whatever. And finance plays a massive role in our historical traumas. So, understanding their behavior, the core root of it, and being able to relate with them on a human level allows us to then take that information at best and then do two things. Either A, help them get past it, or B, accept it and modify our advice around it. Because there are plenty of times we can do something. What we should be looking for is the overlap of the Venn diagram between quantitatively optimal and behaviorally optimal. If there's a part where we can modify our advice, where it's not 100% exactly the right thing you would do, but it's a thing the client can live with and will actually do and will help them succeed, then we should do that, right? And basically, if there isn't, that those Venn diagrams don't overlap, then we have to work towards basically bringing them together somehow, modifying our advice and hopefully nudging the client in the right direction. So the reality is that how do we do that, right? And I think Shaping Wealth has been the only one. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm friends with many people in the behavioral finance space. And I think there's been great books written by the likes of Maurice Summers and Brad Klotz and Daniel Crosby. But in terms of actual training, Shaping Wealth's the only one who's actually been developed a curriculum around that. So, I think the reality is any advisor who wants to, quote unquote, future-proof themselves from the commoditization that's happening, and don't get me wrong, you're not going to go out of business tomorrow, but wants to move towards the upper edge of evolution of the industry, has to really basically spend time better understanding themselves, their own psychological traumas around and their predilections around it, and then also spending time understanding how to actively listen and understand and comprehend and recognize within the client what's happening there. And I'm not saying we become psychologists, like that's not it, but we can borrow from that field the base level of understanding to be more effective at what it is we do. And then this is the next step. That information can now be pumped into technology. And at best, hopefully the long-term vision should be that this becomes seamless, that it is either before the meeting, we can practice, we can rehearse with agents to basically, interact and try to basically do some role play on what the meeting is going to be like. After the meeting, we can get our feedback. During the meeting, that's the ultimate goal. During the meeting, it could nudge us. And it, frankly, in our workflows, in the client experience, all of it, it should just become seamlessly integrated if we do this right.
So that's like a heads-up display you just described? You're in the meeting and you're getting the...
Well, to me, that's the ultimate goal. What I would love, and this exists in the sales world, right? There's a company called Gong that basically has been doing this for years, where they will nudge salespeople during meetings on talking too much, sentiment, tonality, bring up resources that get mentioned. So they've been doing that. And ideally, I would love to see a behavioral version of that. One that says, shut up, Jason, or you're talking too much, or you didn't address this thing the client mentioned earlier, or the client is expressing concern about X. Here's a resource you can share with them. Like that sort of thing to just serve up instead of me getting back to them, like literally here's the thing, make me a better me. right? Like that's what
Yeah.
if we're going to talk about how BFI should be applied in the AI world to make advisors better, then the reality is it has to save me from myself. It has to save me from the common mistakes that I make. It has to basically actively, first and foremost, take its cues from the client and then either before, after, or during, make me better at understanding them, communicating with them, and helping them succeed. That's what it should be doing.
Yeah. Do you know any advisors? I know this is the a whole world of shaping wealth, but advisors who have actually productized that offer or service. Um, they're financial advisors. They help with the financial stuff, but they're also doing the other F's of life. You know, the family, the faith, the fun. Already did finances. Whatever those other the other parts of life where. Because like what you're describing, it sounds like a life coach, right? You talked about self-actualization and becoming truly fulfilled. You didn't say that, but
Yeah.
that's kind of what we hope to do for our clients. And this idea of fulfillment isn't just more money in the bank account. It's really what's that money providing off for all the other areas.
Yeah.
Have you seen any advisors who are doing that and they're tackling all the other parts of life?
Look, every advisor builds their own practice and their own value proposition. So I've seen plenty of very, very kind of like empathetic and astute advisors who are really focusing on the human side of advice or really trying what they can to bring it into. Absolutely, I have, right? There is no one model for this, right? There is no breast proven model for this, right? And it's going to be messy because we're still in the early stages of figuring out this, right? And I don't think we don't even end up in a truly, uniform model of this. But you're right, it is life coaching. But like, what good is money if not, what good is money if it doesn't give you the thing you want out of life, the experience, the life you want, right? So if anything, too often this industry has been about selling 3/4-inch drill bits, to borrow from Clayton Christensen, right? It's been about, here's the thing I can do for you in terms of money. Like it's all been about money and product and everything else. When in actuality, the client is fundamentally coming to you to say, am I going to be okay? Right? Like when they're saying, I want to pay less tax. Yeah, they're saying they want to pay less tax because they need more mentally themselves to keep, whether that be the government or not. But if it's more for them, it's because there's a more that they want to accomplish in their own lives. Now, don't get me wrong. Sometimes that's not the case. People fall into the trap of hedonistic adaptation where they just keep on spending more without finding purpose. But that's something else we can help with. But in general, they're fundamentally coming to us saying, whether it's tax, whether it's estate, whether whatever else it is, it's, I need to solve this problem in my life and in my family and in my experience. And we then go and sell drill bits, right? As opposed to saying, okay, you're going to need this drill bit, but let's talk about whether or not you should be drilling this hole in the first place. Are you even drilling in the right location? Is your focus the thing that you mentioned, the thing you're actually concerned about, right? And really trying to peel back the layers of the onion to actually solve the problem. And too often, I mean, I'm sure you've seen this with clients, and we see this with client behavior all the time. Clients will come to us saying, inevitably, I will tell you that I think we should accept that not every client that comes to us doesn't really know what they're asking, right? They don't really know what the problem is because they haven't taken the time necessarily to truly understand, maybe they've gotten really introspective about their life and they really know what they want to accomplish. But most often when we ask, what are your goals? Clients look back at us dumbfounded because they haven't thought about it. They haven't really thought about it. They'll give you like, I want to retire. I want to do, they haven't really thought it through in any kind of grandiose way, which is fine. They don't have to. But we have all experienced those clients who come to us and say, I've got this is what I want to do. And you're like, that doesn't make sense, or that breaks any number of rules, or that creates more tax. And then you're like, why do you want to do that? And they're like, well, I need to do this. It's like, well, you just came up with a solution for a problem, but your solution is dead wrong because you didn't understand how this worked. Like, it's what I refer to as solutioning, right? They don't come back asking for counsel. They basically come back having a solution in their mind. And that solution is often completely dead wrong, right? And we've all had those clients, right? And I think it's very easy to recognize that behavior when it's at that extreme. But I think we need to realize that, the exercise we do with them, which is say, like, hold on a sec, let's take a check back. And what is it you're actually trying to accomplish? Even when clients don't come to us with, the solutions, and they're just like, well, tell me what to do next. Like, we need to take a step back and really make sure we truly understand the core problem. because only by truly understanding the core problem can we really solve the problem. And that's frankly in every aspect of life, right? Including our business. And, I see it, especially in technology, you see it all the time. I see technology solutions looking for problems, right? Like it's the other way around. What is the problem that we should be building the technology for, right? So the closer, and one last point on this. I mean, I said this at the CFA conference the other day, a couple months ago, and it was, I think we've had it backwards from the beginning, right? This industry has always been like, we've been moving closer and closer to the client in our interactions by offering more and more drill bits and different drill bits and whatever. If we just flip the paradigm, if we really start everything from saying, let's forget all that. Who is it I serve? What is I'm trying to accomplish for them? How am I trying to help them? And then every decision after that should come from that, right? Every decision should come from that. But too often we're coming from the product first or the solution first scenario. Whereas, and this is where I really do encourage people in niche market. When you truly start off, going back to your question, what would you do early in terms of technology? I'll tell you what I would do in terms of business. I would figure out a market that has a need, that there's enough people in that has a deep need, that basically I can identify this niche and I can provide a truly valuable offering towards dealing with their problems, both the ones they know about because they're this type of business owner trying to accomplish whatever or whatever else, but also the ones they don't know about, which is, again, back to what is it you're actually trying to accomplish? I would create a structure around that and come up with that ideal client profile. And then from there, all the decisions regarding technology, like do I buy Holistiplan or FP Alpha? Am I going to do that as part of my core offering? All those decisions on what to do downstream come from the understanding of the client and the problem you're solving.
I got to digest that for a minute. So I'm thinking about, so I kind of want to dive more into the first, second meeting and creating connection.
Sure.
But I think there's a lot within that shaping wealth that's going to help with that. So I encourage advisors to check that out. But any small practical thing that you do or that we should do to really kind of, what's that breakthrough moment? And I know it's not just one thing, but when do clients or prospects take that leap over kind of the trust chasm or whatever, where they actually start to connect deeper with you in that first meeting? Any thoughts around that in terms of just how you're approaching the meeting, what you start to talk about, how you end the meeting, any practical things like that?
Well, I'll say, fortunately and unfortunately, fortunately for me, unfortunately for the client, the bar is already pretty low. And I'll tell you what happens in terms of the experience I typically have with clients when we first meet. First question is always like, what brought them to this? Like, why now? Like, are they unhappy with their current advisor? Do they not have one? Is there a big decision point in life? Like, there's always they're not waking up and randomly calling us, right? There's a reason they called. So let's understand why. Let me start with that. And then, part of the conversation will be understanding, like, what is your current experience with this industry and people, right? And, they basically will, more often than not, most people have a transactional relationship with their advisors if they have any at all. And then beyond that, what will happen is we'll often talk about, have you talked to anybody else, right? And more often than not, the response is that they've met with one or a number of other transactional people who also offer other services. And they basically say things like, oh yeah, the guy pulled out a portfolio out of his bag and basically said, we'll do this and don't worry, you can modify it if you don't do it. And by the way, we also do financial planning. I'm sitting there going like, I point out how farcical the industry is in a lot of ways. I say, well, let me get this straight. So he's saying, give me your life savings so I can then find out everything about you. But I'll invest your money first. Like, it's pretty backwards. And then I'm like, that's a wonderful magical bag he had, that he had the solution for you without ever meeting you before he met you and pulled that out. So I kind of poke fun at it. And I say, like, look, let's take a step back from all this, right? And more often than not, I start off with them just telling me as much as they're willing to tell me about their lives. And I'm asking questions around, like, just getting deeper on what they just said. Like, okay, what about this relationship did you not like? What about you say this is, you're doing this now. How are you feeling about, your retirement's coming up? How are you feeling about that? Like, are you feeling anxious about the entire thing? Like, trying to uncover, like, what are the hot button issues? What is their level of understanding of what it is this industry is, what it is they've experienced, and setting ourselves up for the conversation which is the back half of the conversation, is what we can do for them, right?
Mhm.
So early on, the conversation better be, I have to say, like if I talk more than 25% of the time, I've talked too much, right? It should be them talking through most of it. And again, it's always got to be focused on what brought them here today, what they've gone through within this industry and what they're going through in their lives, what they hope to accomplish, and just trying to pry out what are the pressing things that they care about? What are the 2 or 3 things that really has them concerned and what really drove? Because it's almost never one thing. It's like, it could be this thing around some compensation issue, but it's also like, okay, this compensation issue, you're worried about tax and, you want to retire, you're putting your kids through school, you want to pay down your mortgage, like something. It's always a mosaic, right? Try to understand the mosaic. And then, just the act of actively listening and not selling them stuff from day one already starts to establish a difference from what they're used to, for most cases, unfortunately. And we basically say, like, look, you're either a fit or not. And we kind of test for if they're fit or not based on personality and what they're looking for. If they're just looking like, I don't like my guy because he's not getting returns high enough. And, the returns were actually quite fun. And these people just have a ridiculous expectation. I'll be honest with them. But then we move into like what it is we do, right? The conversation then starts off with like, look, we're going to start off by taking all the time to collect all this information on you, do the financial plan before we onboard you. We're going to charge for that because we have to do it. And here's the reason why. It's because, like, frankly, I have no business telling you how to do anything else regarding your investing, your insurance, your taxes, any of this stuff until I know who you are, what it is you want out of life, what money's coming to you, where it's going to, like your ins, your outs, all of that, like your dreams, your aspirations, like even if you've never been asked about that. And look, don't worry if you haven't thought through your dreams and aspirations. Like we'll start, if you know what you want, great, tell me. If you don't, like we'll start with some basic stuff. Like, you're going to retire around the time everybody else does. You're going to put your kids through school, like all this other stuff. But we're going to, like something in the distant horizon, as we get to know each other, the actual vision for the future is going to start to come into focus and we will adjust along the way. And then we get into the fact that we are then going to deliver in bite sizes. We do it very modularly: financial plan, investment, tax, estate, insurance, all of them as separate meetings, because we don't ever want to overwhelm. And we let people know, like, look, this is going to take a better part of a year to get everything done. And it's because, frankly, like if I try to do all of this or more of this in like 2 to 3 meetings, you just be so overwhelmed by it. And people appreciate that because they typically had overwhelming like I heard this other advisor talk about a 2-hour plan delivery meeting the other day. And I thought to myself, like, if 2 hours are involved, it better be at a movie theater and it better involve popcorn and I better not be thinking. Like that's like, no one wants to sit there for 2 hours and look at spreadsheets and tables and charts and be inundated with like the aspects. It's just too much to take in. So, and we're trying to show thoughtfulness and consideration throughout every explanation. But then we say at the end of the day, look, this isn't like, we're going to get through all of this, but at the end of the day, like, this is all about one thing. It's about enabling your life, right? Like, you may not know what that full vision looks like. Again, don't be overwhelmed by that. Let's work on the discovery together, right? And I think just getting away from, and we like literally, we don't even talk about performance or portfolio allocations in those meetings. Maybe 1 out of every 50 times that comes up in the conversation, because that's not why they're coming to us. They're coming to us because they have something they want to accomplish. They're feeling overwhelmed. They're probably feeling disorganized. They're probably feeling a little bit of shame for not being organized with this stuff. We take that away. Like that's what we want to take away. At no point do I want anything to be overwhelming or them to feel uncomfortable. And that's what we try to create. We try to create this sense of comfort and that we're going to listen. We're here to listen. And we do that from the first day.
I love that. When you were talking about goals and finding out what they really want, one thing I've loved doing is anti-goals.
Yeah.
Because it's sometimes much easier to figure out what you hate versus what you love, for humans to do that, or at least for some people. And that's been great to paint the picture of like I don't want to overpay taxes. Or,
okay, but why not?
I want to be bored in retirement or whatever.
But you know what, even those like, no one wants to overpay taxes, but it's almost always invariably stemmed in some concern about not having enough themselves, right? Like,
yeah.
Right. Or feeling cheated, like some sort of like, hey, I could be doing less, but I'm not. And I could be paying less, but I'm not. So I feel like I just got cheated. Like there's always a driving, everything they tell you. Right. And as for anti-goals, I love that because I don't really ask it as an anti-goal. It's like, well, let's consider the alternative. What are you afraid of happening? Right. And like the reality is, whether it's an anti-goal is a great way of teasing out what's actually driving what they're saying they want.
Yeah. So let's go back to the future. And
we just saw that musical, by the way. It was fantastic.
Oh, was it? Let's imagine you're a futuristic guy, so you could probably envision this, but 3 years from today or 5 years from today, and let's just say for the advisor, the normal advisor, what's a typical day look like for an advisor in 3 or 5 years?
I don't like making predictions on stocks, and because I'm going to be wrong, so I won't. And I don't like making predictions fully on technology. I can tell you general directions, right?
Yeah.
So general directions. I wrote an article for Kitsis about a year ago. It said, reality is in 2 years' time, your life's not going to change much because of artificial intelligence, but in 10 years' time, your business is going to be completely different. But then again, that's how all technology evolutions work. So what do I think it looks like? I think it looks like, and I'm not going to say between 3 or 5 years, but the near future, the not so distant future, looks like a world where you are being served up contextual information at the time of need more frequently. You go in and you open up your probably CRM screen or the equivalent of whatever, the dashboard that you spend the most time in, that basically has access to your client information. And this CRMs have had this long-standing dream of next best action, right? Like, what's the next best thing you should do? I think that becomes a more real thing. I think that we basically, in addition to our calendars of what we're going to do, there is a list of other concerns or things you should be looking at served up to you that is not things that you would have thought of, right? It's the system telling you that this client's broken their pattern in terms of logging in to check their account, right? This client sent you an email overnight that you've yet to read, but the tonality is different, right? That it's basically taking in signals from all over the place and creating a better understanding of individual clients to then basically better understand the advisor. That your calendar will not only serve you up this, but it will also create a lot of easy buttons. It will basically, this needs to be done today. And, this is already possible in a lot of things. And I think, again, going back to some of the stuff Altruist has done, they've done a lot of these easy buttons. It's, this is the thing that needs to be done for the client. All the research is here, or all the work that needs to be done is here. Validate this before you execute, right? You're still the human in the loop. Boom. Reducing the amount of labor we need, whether it be ourselves or back office people or support staff, where the interaction with the client, we are better prepared for it, where we are able to, I could see a world where you basically 20 minutes before a meeting, you take a time to role play that with an agent. And basically just because if the client, there's an agenda already, there's any indication of client sentimentality, what is it? He'll ask you, what do you think the client's going to basically talk to you about? And boom, it can basically get you ready for that and have you kind of doing those reps before you actually get into the meeting. It's a world that will nudge us, to be better. That will, but specifically also, so if I'm going to summarize all of this, giving us better contextual information, giving us the ability to better prepare and service clients in real life engagement, and the ability to also action all the work that needs to be done more effectively with less human interaction. That's really kind of the three key areas. All of those are things that I think we will see in the near future.
Interesting. Well, I'll check back in 3 years and let you know if you were right or wrong. And
well, we'll see. I have no doubt we'll see certain parts of this, but are we going to be anywhere near, 10 years down the road, knock on wood, it's a lot more push button, but we're going to see signs of this emerging in the next couple of years, I think.
Yeah. Interesting. As long as it is getting people closer together, that's a win.
Well, but look at this, right? So let's look at the evolution. You go back 20 years and an advisor, the amount of AUM you run today being run back then would have taken probably 2 to 3x the staff, right? Mm-hmm. This has the potential to reduce the amount of staff we have, right? And in addition to that, the amount of time that our expertise needs to be applied to things is going to reduce dramatically, freeing up our time. So if we have excess time, what happens with that time? There are 3 things when it comes to the advisory practice world. A, you consume it and just continue to service same number of clients, but you don't basically change anything and you take more time off, right? Fine, that's what you're going to do. 2, you basically expand the number of clients you're going to be dealing with. But again, now we run into the one piece of hardware that hasn't been upgraded, which is the human mind. Dunbar number, can't deal with more than 150 relationships on average. Subtract out friends and family. Let's assume there's a reason why the ideal advisor book size is 100 households or less, right? It's because we can still cognitively pick up the phone and remember that guy's son broke his leg 2 months ago and be all that. And even if an AI has the ability to remind me of that for 1,000 different clients, it's not sincere. It's not real. Because, like me picking up saying, oh yeah, by the way, my CRM is, this is saying that your son broke his leg. How's that doing? It's not the same thing as knowing the human being, and they're going to be able to detect that intimacy or not. And then the last one is expanding of offering, which is where the industry has managed to maintain its margins. It's managed to maintain its margins by continually expanding the service offering to provide deeper and deeper value. You look at the margins of a 80s style broker today versus back in the 80s, and what has happened? Their margins have shrunk immensely. Why? Commoditization. If we do not continue to figure out how to offer more and more value to consumers, then we will experience the same thing. We haven't, advisor businesses largely haven't to date for two reasons. One, we have expanded service offering, and two, the market doesn't move overnight. It takes time. But again, look at a business model from 20 years ago that was basically the norm, and it ain't as profitable as today. That's for sure.
Fascinating. Thank you, Jason, for coming on. This has been great. I'm rewatching this. Actually, I'll put it into AI and just give me the summary. But this,
By all means.
This is wonderful. Thank you.
All right, my pleasure.